This episode is brought to you by Squarespace. Go to squarespace.com/microcosmos to get a free trial and 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. When you think of kombucha, you might think of a nice, refreshing, healthy drink, one that's exceptionally good for your microbiome. But what we here at Journey to the Microcosmos think of is different from that. Our first thought is of a terrarium, a place where a whole ecosystem can exist, trapped in glass. Kombucha is an old and mysterious drink. It's thought to have originated around 221 BCE in Korea and China, though we had a hard time tracking down the sources for that date. There are also reports of kombucha being consumed in Russia in the 19th century, but those two time points don't tell us much about how kombucha came to be. And that's not that unusual when it comes to ancient foods. Here on Journey to the Microcosmos, we've ventured into the microbial world of food like bread, yogurt, and cheese, and the processes humans have used to make these foods go so far back and are accompanied by so much lore that it is difficult to untangle exact histories. But no matter how murky the history is, the microbial universe buried in these foods is somewhat consistent. There is an organism, maybe a yeast or a bacteria or a fungus. It wants to survive, and so it uses the resources around it like sugar or the proteins in milk to do that. It might even work with one or two other organisms to accomplish its goals. So James, our master of microscopes, thought kombucha was going to be a very familiar sight. Something chill, like brewer's yeast, or something like the feeling he gets when looking at fermentation products like yogurt under the microscope, which to him are kind of like domesticated animals in a petting zoo. There's a stable environment and plenty of food, and the organisms within have no predators and no competitors. But that's not what he saw when he looked at kombucha. The word that came to mind then was wild. It was so wild that at first he thought he was looking at kombucha that had maybe gone bad, but he quickly realized that this was not the case. Kombucha is just wild like this. Now, if you know anything about how to make kombucha, then you've probably heard about this weird thing that James is pulling out of the top of his kombucha sample. This is the SCOBY. It's a strange word, but it stands for something. Symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. So yes, that wiggly mass is actually the weird, wild world of bacteria and yeast that makes kombucha possible. We're not in the business of giving recipes here on Journey to the Microcosmos, and besides, everyone has their own preferences, so we're just going to describe how one might go about making a SCOBY. The process starts with some brewed tea, usually black or green, which is then mixed with some sugar. Then a bit of some prior kombucha is added to the mix, providing a starter culture of the bacteria and yeast. Then the container is covered with something breathable and set aside. Over the next few weeks, bubbles begin to form on the surface of the mixture, gathering together until they form a thin layer. That layer eventually thickens into the solid SCOBY. While the liquid used in this fermentation process will ultimately be too vinegary to drink, the SCOBY can be used in subsequent fermentations with brewed tea and sugar. For those of you who are experienced kombucha brewers, you might be filling in the gaps of our description with a myriad of choices that make your kombucha taste the way it tastes, whether that's the use of store-bought cultures or the addition of flavorings in later steps. That's the thing about kombucha. It is all so complicated and, again, wild. The community of bacteria and yeast that makes up the SCOBY can vary tremendously depending on where the kombucha was originally made. And as fermentation progresses, the composition of the community changes as well, evolving with the culture and responding to microbes in the air that might try to interact with the kombucha. So this community we're looking at might have looked very different a few weeks prior, and the species might not be the exact same species that make your favorite kombucha, but the underlying processes they engage in to make that kombucha are the same. When the starter culture is mixed with the brewed tea and sugar, the yeast use an enzyme called invertase to break down the sugar into smaller monomers. This kicks off a whole series of metabolic reactions, beginning with the yeast and bacteria converting those sugar monomers into ethanol and carbon dioxide. The ethanol could be a problem, as too much can be toxic for the residents of the mixture. Luckily, the bacteria are able to oxidize the ethanol, producing acetic acid in the process. At the same time, the bacteria makes cellulose, which helps form the biofilm of the SCOBY. These interactions demonstrate quite a bit of cooperation between the bacteria and yeast, and each carries out reactions that make each other's survival possible. They might break down sugar or lower ethanol levels or create the molecules that will help bind the community going forward. These are all examples of cooperation and a nice foundation for an ecosystem. For a drink that is as associated with wholesomeness as kombucha often is, that's a nice image, but ecosystems aren't marked solely by cooperation. They are also marked by competition as organisms vie for limited resources and space. There are several ways we might see this competition taking place in kombucha. For example, not all yeast can make invertase, that enzyme that kicks everything off by breaking down sugar for the community to partake in. These non-invertase yeasts are considered cheaters, taking advantage of the resources provided by other organisms without contributing any of their own. But one study of yeast grown with the bacteria Escherichia coli found that cheater yeast tend to not grow as well as the yeast with invertase. In an environment where everyone wants sugar, these cheater yeast don't seem to survive as well, perhaps because their non-cheating counterparts are able to consume a tiny bit of the sugar monomers they produce. And that competition between yeasts might carry over to the kombucha. Earlier, we mentioned that bacteria oxidize ethanol into acetic acid, lowering the pH of the environment overall. This acid is actually one of several acids found in kombucha, leading scientists to wonder whether acid in general serves as a protective quality of the environment, deterring organisms that can't survive in acidic conditions and creating a gate against invaders that's made out of that low pH. And there's another potential shield against invaders, the SCOBY itself. The thickness of the biofilm acts as a physical deterrent, further strengthened by its competition, which makes it hard for other organisms to diffuse their way into the kombucha. Now we should note, these deterrents aren't always effective, and sometimes unwelcome organisms can find their way into the SCOBY, at which point you should probably not drink that kombucha. It is this wild and complex array of interactions, some of which are better understood than others, that makes us think of kombucha like a terrarium. A glass bottle full of an environment that you can watch brewing itself an ecosystem. With every bit of SCOBY that bubbles to the surface and attaches to each other, we get to see this untamed landscape assemble. And with every SCOBY transferred to a new culture, we can replicate this small, wild universe. Thank you for coming on this journey with us as we explore the unseen world that surrounds us. And thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this episode. So let's say you're looking to create a stunning online store for your fashion brand. With Squarespace, you can create a beautiful and professional-looking website that showcases your unique style and brand. And with the help of their third-party extensions, you can easily manage inventory, streamline bookkeeping, and ship products across the world. And if you're interested in blogging about your fashion brand, Squarespace makes it easy to create a blog that seamlessly integrates with your online store. You can share your latest collections, style tips, and behind-the-scenes glimpses into your creative process with your readers. With Squarespace, you can also interact with your customers and build a community of fashion enthusiasts through threaded comments and replies. You can sign up today for a free trial at squarespace.com, and when you're ready to launch, visit squarespace.com/microcosmos to enjoy a 10% discount on your first purchase of a website or domain. Let's crack open a cold kombucha to cheers the people on the screen right now. They are our Patreon patrons. They're the people who make it possible for us to continue exploring all the weird and wild ways our lives are influenced by tiny, tiny creatures that we barely even know exist. So thank you to our patrons for allowing us to continue this journey. If you want to join them, you can go to patreon.com/journeytomicro. If you want to see more from our master of microscopes, James Weiss, you can check out Jam and Germs on Instagram. And if you want to see more from us, there's always a subscribe button somewhere nearby.